For 60 years, Arthur Finch had lived in his lakeside cabin with no interruptions more serious than a raccoon raid on the trash cans. The cabin, hand-built with his father and maintained over decades, was more than a home. It was memory, identity, and sanctuary. Every creaking floorboard and weather-worn dock plank had a story. Arthur's mornings were sacred, coffee in hand, the lake breeze tousling his thinning white hair, the sound of lapping water lulling his thoughts. That peace shattered on a Tuesday morning. He heard the click of heels long before he saw her. Sharp, deliberate, and wholly out of place on gravel. The sound echoed like gunshots. Arthur looked up, frowning. The silhouette of Diane Whitley emerged at the edge of the drive, flanked by two unfamiliar board members, a clipboard-wielding young man and a stiff-looking woman in a navy pantsuit. He knew that walk. He knew her. It had been years, but Diane's confident stride was unmistakable. His coffee mug steamed beside him on the porch railing. Arthur stood slowly, rubbing the ache from his knees. He wasn't in the mood for visitors, especially not ones in polished shoes and power suits. "Arthur," Diane said crisply, no smile, no greeting. Just his name, like a summons. "Morning," Arthur replied, voice even. Diane didn't wait for permission. She climbed the steps as though she owned them, the others trailing behind like backup dancers. "We need to discuss your property violations." That sentence landed with all the grace of a brick through glass. Arthur blinked. "Property violations? Diane, I've lived here longer than you've had a driver's license." She flipped open a leather folder that looked like it belonged to a lawyer about to file suit. "Your dock violates multiple safety codes. Your maintenance falls short of our community's updated standards. The shoreline usage is inconsistent with regulations." Arthur glanced at the two board members. They nodded silently, like bobbleheads. He didn't know them, and they clearly didn't know him. He turned his attention back to Diane. She was dressed like a CEO, but her tone, commanding, rehearsed, reminded him of something else. She sounded like a student trying to impress a professor. Funny, that's exactly what she used to be. Decades ago, Diane Whitley had sat in the front row of his property law and surveying workshops at the local community college. She was bright, curious, and driven. She'd stayed after class with questions about easements, title transfers, and shoreline encroachments. "Professor Finch," she'd once asked, "what happens when historical usage contradicts recorded boundaries?" Now, she stood here, trying to use those very lessons against him. "I don't want to make this difficult," Diane said, flipping another page in her file. "But if you don't comply, we'll have to take further action. This is a prestigious community now. We can't have inconsistencies." That word, inconsistencies. She said it like he was a moldy plank on a mansion floor, something to be scraped away. Arthur stared at her. "You ever think about where you learned all this, Diane?" She paused just slightly. The clipboard guy looked up, puzzled. Arthur stepped closer. "I taught you how to read property maps, how to identify survey fraud, how to cross-reference boundaries against natural landmarks. You think I don't remember?" Diane's expression froze, but her voice remained cool. "Then you'll understand the importance of compliance. We're giving you 30 days to bring your property into alignment with HOA standards. That includes removing the dock." The dock. His father had built that dock. Arthur had reinforced it after the 1998 flood. It had weathered 3 hurricanes and supported generations of fishing lines, laughter, and quiet reflection. Now, it was a liability? A violation? He clenched his jaw. "You should double-check those original county surveys before making demands." Diane hesitated. For 3 seconds, maybe less. But it was enough. 2 weeks after Arthur discovered the creeping dockline shift, the confrontation he feared arrived. Not with a knock on the door, but a certified letter stamped with a red seal. The return address read, Pine Bluff HOA Legal Division. Arthur stood in his cabin's kitchen, fingers tracing the edges of the envelope. He tore it open and unfolded the tri-folded pages inside. The tone was sterile, but the message was chilling. Asterisk, Dear Mr. Arthur Caldwell, it has come to our attention that a private dock on your property violates community shoreline alignment standards established in Article 9, Section 4 of the Pine Bluff Community Regulations. Said structure extends 32 feet beyond the easement boundary. You are hereby required to dismantle the structure within 15 calendar days of receipt or face civil penalties and lien placement as authorized by Section 17.3. Asterisk. Arthur scoffed. There had never been a shared shoreline boundary. His father's deed, the blueprints, and the property taxes, all of it confirmed the cabin and its lake access had always been independent of HOA jurisdiction. But the letter didn't ask, it warned. He snapped a photo and texted it to Eric, his son. They're trying to erase our deed line. This just got real. Arthur spent that evening digging through the drawer full of official documents. He dusted off a yellowed, folder-marked property, original survey. But something inside gnawed at him. If the HOA was so bold to send legal threats, either they were bluffing or they had rewritten something at the county level. Either way, this wasn't over a dock. This was a land grab. Arthur sat alone that night on the edge of the dock they claimed was illegal. It was built in 1962, sanded smooth by decades of water, time, and care. His father, James Caldwell, had laid every board, often repeating the phrase, "If we do it right the first time, son, it'll last longer than we do." Now, the HOA wanted to erase all that. They weren't just targeting wood and nails. They were gutting a legacy. Arthur's thoughts churned in silence. What was once just a peaceful place to escape now felt like a war front. There was a deep ache in his chest, not just from age, but from helplessness. He had lived through recessions, job losses, and health scares. But this was betrayal from the very people who shared bonfires, barbecues, and late cleanup weekends with his father. He called Mary, his late wife's sister. She answered on the second ring. "They're trying to take the cabin, Mary." "Arthur, no. That place is your home. James built it for you. It's his blood in those beams." "I know," he said quietly, "but they sent a formal demand. Like I'm trespassing on my own land." Mary went silent. Then, she said something that stuck with him. "Your father left you more than a cabin. He left you a fight worth having." Fueled by Mary's words, Arthur spent the next morning tearing through the crawlspace beneath the cabin. It was mostly spider webs, insulation, and the odd rusted can of paint. But tucked in a broken trunk, behind a panel of old pine slats, he found it. A locked tin box. The box was heavier than expected. It had James's initials etched crudely on the lid. Arthur pried it open with a crowbar. Inside were three things: an oilskin pouch, a small ledger, and a metal flask still half full of his father's favorite bourbon. Arthur opened the pouch. His hands trembled. Inside was the original 1952 notarized county survey. Signed, stamped, witnessed. The map showed something remarkable. The property line didn't just hug the cabin. It extended a full 35 feet past the shoreline, enclosing the boathouse and dock area as private land. No easement, no community access, no shared buffer. Arthur laughed, not out of joy, but sheer disbelief. They never had a case. Back inside, Arthur scanned the document. Every mark, every coordinate matched the landmarks still visible. Pine Bluff rock outcrop, the old sycamore stump, the bend in Silver Creek. Arthur sat in his study, staring at the glowing scan of the 1952 county survey. The old yellowed paper, stamped by a long-retired county official, might as well have been a grenade. He knew the HOA wouldn't back down with a polite phone call or a sit-down. No, this was war, and wars required leverage. He didn't have powerful lawyers. He didn't have political connections. But he did have one thing: public outrage. Arthur contacted the local news station anonymously and provided both the survey and the HOA's threats. "This HOA is trying to seize property through fraud," he wrote in the email. "Their president has redrawn the lake map to benefit her son's property. I have proof." It didn't take long. The next evening, the news anchor stood in front of the lake with a microphone and a blown-up copy of the 1952 survey. Behind her, Arthur's cabin loomed stoically on its rightful land. "Is this the latest example of HOA overreach?" she said into the camera. "Tonight, we investigate claims of forged maps, stolen land, and one man's fight for justice." The story exploded. Online forums swarmed with outrage. "Burn that HOA to the ground. one commenter wrote. "This is theft, plain and simple," said another. Arthur didn't give interviews. He wanted the story to speak for itself. Instead of retreating, HOA President Meredith Sloan went on the offensive. The next morning, Arthur woke to find a cease and desist letter nailed to his dock. Not placed gently, nailed with 5-inch screws. Inside, the HOA's legal team claimed defamation, trespassing on community waters, and obstruction of an ongoing shoreline beautification project. "They're not even pretending anymore," Arthur muttered. Meredith held a closed-door meeting with select HOA board members and a few hand-picked residents. But several neighbors, now sympathetic to Arthur after seeing the news report, began leaking the contents of those meetings. Word spread that the HOA was preparing a legal filing to seize not just the dock, but Arthur's entire property, claiming it had been improperly deeded from his father. "She's going nuclear," Arthur told himself. Worse, a survey crew appeared unannounced one morning, trespassing on Arthur's land to place red survey flags around what they now claimed was common shoreline. That afternoon, Arthur filed a formal police report for trespassing. The deputy, visibly uncomfortable, said, "You're not the first complaint. This HOA is on our radar." Meredith made good on her threats. Within days, Arthur was served a civil lawsuit. The complaint accused Arthur of building and maintaining an illegal dock on HOA-regulated land, citing updated HOA bylaws and the fabricated boundary map. They also claimed the 1952 survey was outdated and irrelevant, trying to shift authority to the HOA's 2023 revision, which had been quietly inserted into the community handbook. Arthur contacted a local attorney who had experience with property disputes and HOAs. She was young but sharp, Mallory Dean. After reviewing the documents, her eyebrows lifted. "They're bluffing. If that 1952 survey holds, they don't have a leg to stand on." Mallory filed a countersuit, citing property fraud, document forgery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She also issued subpoenas for internal HOA communications. Meredith's camp wasn't ready for that. Within a week, leaked emails began surfacing. Messages between HOA board members discussing ways to reclassify the old property lines and using phrases like, "Arthur won't have the money to fight us." The tide began to shift. With the lawsuit now public, Arthur became a reluctant symbol of community resistance. Several neighbors approached him privately. "She tried to fine me $3,000 for trimming a tree," one said. Another claimed Meredith denied their home addition over a grudge. A quiet alliance formed. By the time the court date was set, Arthur had 25 neighbors ready.